This is HOA boardroom battles. The evidence binder came out before the apology did. I am calling the board right now. Melissa Garner stood on my patio with her phone already raised like a weapon, her face red, her voice loud enough that I knew the entire townhouse row could hear. She pointed at my car in the visitor lot and said the rules let her search common areas and she would start with my patio. I held up both hands and told her she could not search anything without a warrant. She laughed and said I signed the covenants, now I live the covenants. That was the moment I knew this was going to get worse. I live in Boise, Idaho, in a place called Sunset Ridge Community Association, a townhouse complex where every driveway is identical and every mailbox cluster has the same fake stone veneer. I work as a sales rep, which means I drive all day and I need my car running and accessible at all times. Melissa is the landscape committee chair, which in this HOA means she has keys to the storage closets, access to the clubhouse, and a clipboard that never leaves her hand. She also has a loud whistle on a cheap lanyard and a laminated guideline sheet she waves without letting anyone read it. 2 nights ago, someone rummaged through a neighbor's car in the visitor lot and took HOA storage padlock keys from the glove box. This morning, Melissa knocked on my door and said she saw my silhouette near the vehicles at night. I told her I was asleep. She said she had video. I asked to see it. She held up her phone with a cropped still image, zoomed in so far it could have been anyone, and said that was all the proof she needed. Now she was on my patio threatening an immediate tow against my car as punishment. She said my vehicle would be gone by noon unless I admitted what I did and returned the keys. I asked her how she planned to authorize a tow without proof. She smiled and said she already sent the work order. My stomach dropped. I had a medical appointment later today and I needed my car. I told her she could not tow my car over an accusation. She said the covenants gave her discretion and my name was on a security list. I asked what list. She turned and walked away without answering. But she called over her shoulder, "If you fight me, I will make it worse." I went inside and pulled up the HOA portal on my laptop. There was a new notice posted under my account, violation notice, unauthorized activity, vehicle subject to removal. No hearing date, no appeal instructions, just a line that said enforcement action pending. I screenshotted it and texted my neighbor Leo, the guy 2 units down who films everything from his window because he got burned by the HOA last year over a fake landscaping complaint. He replied in seconds, "I saw her at your car this morning. She was taking photos." "I have the clip. Send it to me," I said. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a video file. The timestamp showed 6:15 this morning. Melissa walked up to my car, leaned down to look in the windows, took 3 photos with her phone held inches from the glass, then walked toward the mailbox cluster with something in her hand. The angle was not perfect, but it was clear. I saved it and started planning. By 10, I was at the clubhouse trying to file an appeal. The staff at the front desk, a young guy named Travis, looked uncomfortable when I explained the situation. He said I needed to submit the appeal form by end of business. I asked for the form. He printed one and slid it across the counter. I filled it out on the spot, attached a printed screenshot of the doorbell clip timestamp, and handed it back. Travis looked it over and said it looked complete. I started to relax. Then Melissa walked in. She saw me at the counter and her face went hard. She marched over and told Travis not to accept that form. He froze. I asked her what she was talking about. She said my appeal was invalid because it was missing a step she invented, a signed witness affidavit from someone in the HOA vouching for my character. I told her that was not in the rules. She pulled out her laminated guideline sheet and waved it in my face without letting me read it. She said the rules were updated last month and I should have checked. Travis looked at me and shrugged. I asked him if he had a copy of the updated rules. He said he did not. Melissa said the rules were available upon request and I should have requested them. Then she turned and walked out, taking my appeal form with her. I stood there staring at Travis. He whispered that he was sorry, but she was technically in charge of compliance enforcement for the landscape committee, and he could not override her. I asked him if there was anyone above her. He said management handled appeals, but they only reviewed complete submissions. I asked him what complete meant. He said whatever Melissa decided it meant. Another witness overhearing this mess. I walked out and called Leo. I told him what happened. He said Melissa pulled the same moving goalpost tactic on him last year, and he ended up paying a $200 fine just to make it stop. I asked him if he still had his video clip. He said yes, and he would email it to me with a sworn statement if I needed it. I told him to hold off for now because I did not want to burn that card too early. I needed more leverage. At 11:30, I got a text from the tow company. It said my vehicle was scheduled for removal at 1 p.m., and I could contest the authorization at their office. I grabbed my keys and my notepad and drove to the tow yard before they could hook my car. The office was a low metal building with a faded sign and a waiting area that smelled like motor oil. The guy behind the counter, a middle-aged man with a stained shirt and a name tag that said Dale, pulled up my work order and said the HOA authorized it this morning. I asked to see the authorization paperwork. He flipped through a file and handed me a single sheet with a printed form. The top said Sunset Ridge Community Association, and the authorization line had Melissa Garner typed in. No signature, no board stamp, just her name. I took a photo of it with my phone. Then I pointed at the line and asked Dale if he verified the authorization with anyone besides Melissa. He said he did not need to because she was listed as a contact. I told him she did not have unilateral authority to tow, and I wanted to file a dispute. He sighed and said I could submit a dispute form, but the tow would proceed unless the HOA canceled the order. I asked him who I could call. He gave me a management office number. I called the number from the parking lot. A woman answered and said she was with the property management company that handled Sunset Ridge. I explained the situation. She put me on hold for 3 minutes, then came back and said Melissa submitted the tow request as part of an enforcement action and it was within her discretion. I told her Melissa was lying about having video evidence and I had proof she was framing me. The woman said I needed to submit my evidence through the appeals process. I told her Melissa blocked my appeal. The woman paused. Then she said she would escalate it to the senior manager and someone would call me back. I asked when. She said within 2 business days. I told her my car was getting towed in 90 minutes. She said there was nothing she could do to stop it without board approval. I hung up. I sat in my car trying to decide what to do next. My phone buzzed. It was Leo. He said Melissa just tried to bar him from the clubhouse entrance in public because he asked her about the theft investigation. He said she stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and told him he was not welcome until the matter was resolved. A pool attendant named Raj stepped in and told Melissa she did not run the gate, and Leo was a resident. Melissa ignored him and kept blocking the door until Raj threatened to call management. She finally moved, but she told Leo this was not over. Leo recorded the whole thing on his phone. He sent me the clip. I watched it twice. Melissa looked unhinged. Raj looked disgusted. I saved the file. At 12:15, I was back at the clubhouse trying a different approach. I walked in and asked Travis if I could request a copy of the updated compliance rules Melissa mentioned. He said he would check. He went into the back office and came out 5 minutes later with nothing. He said there was no updated rules document on file, and the last revision was 3 years ago. I asked him to print me a copy of the revision log. He did. I looked at it. No updates in the last 12 months. I took a photo. Then I asked Travis if Melissa had access to the filing system. He said she had a key to the storage closet where old records were kept, but she was not supposed to remove anything without logging it. I asked him if there was a log. He said there was supposed to be, but he had not seen anyone use it in months. I thanked him and left. I drove back to my unit and started building a file. I had the doorbell clip showing Melissa at my car. I had the appeal form she took. I had the tow authorization with no signature. I had the revision log showing no rule updates. I had Leo's video of her blocking the clubhouse door. I printed everything and put it in a binder. Then I called the management office again and asked to speak to the senior manager directly. The woman said he was in a meeting. I told her it was urgent. She said she would leave a message. I asked for his email. She gave it to me. I sent him the entire file as attachments with a subject line that said fraudulent tow authorization and falsified rules. Then I waited. At 12:45, my phone rang. It was the senior manager. His name was Paul. He said he reviewed my email and he had concerns. I asked him what kind of concerns. He said Melissa submitted a formal complaint this morning alleging theft, and she included a timeline and a witness statement. I told him the timeline was fake and I could prove it. He said he would need to see the proof in person. I asked him when. He said he could meet me at the clubhouse in 20 minutes. I said I would be there. I grabbed my binder and drove back to the clubhouse. Paul was already there, a tall man in a polo shirt and khakis with a tablet under his arm. Travis led us into a side office. I spread my file on the table. Paul looked at the doorbell clip timestamp and compared it to the timeline Melissa submitted. Her timeline said I was near the cars at 11 p.m. The doorbell clip showed her at my car at 6:15 a.m. Paul frowned. He asked if I had anything else. I showed him the revision log proving there were no updated rules. He made a note. Then I showed him the tow authorization with no signature. He took a photo of it with his phone. He said he would suspend the tow pending a review. I asked him how long. He said 48 hours. I told him that was not good enough because I had a medical appointment today. He said he would call the tow company and request an extension. He stepped out to make the call. While Paul was on the phone, Melissa walked into the clubhouse. She saw me through the office window and her face went red. She pushed the door open and demanded to know what I was doing. I told her I was presenting evidence. She said I had no right to present anything because my appeal was incomplete. Paul came back in and told her to step out. She refused. She said she was the one who filed the complaint and she had a right to be present. Paul told her this was a management review, not a hearing, and she needed to leave. She did not move. Paul raised his voice and said if she did not leave, he would call security. She finally stepped out, but she stood in the hallway glaring through the window. Paul sat down and said the tow was on hold for now. I thanked him. He said he still needed to verify my evidence before he could clear me. I asked him what else he needed. He said he wanted to see the original video file with metadata. I told him Leo had it. Paul said he would need Leo to provide a statement. I called Leo right there. He said he would come to the clubhouse. 15 minutes later, he walked in with his laptop. He pulled up the video file and showed Paul the metadata. The creation date was 6:15 a.m. today. Paul made another note. Then Leo played the video. Paul watched Melissa lean down to my car and take photos. He asked Leo if he saw me anywhere in the clip. Leo said no. Paul asked if he saw anyone else. Leo said no. Paul thanked him and said that was enough. Paul turned to me and said based on the evidence he was clearing me of the theft allegation and voiding the tow authorization. I asked him what would happen to Melissa. He said that was a separate matter and he would handle it internally. I told him that was not good enough because she was still interfering with my deliveries and access. He asked what I meant. I explained that she tried to block Leo from the clubhouse and she was on a power trip. Paul said he would address it. I pressed him. I said I wanted a written statement clearing me and I wanted confirmation that Melissa would not retaliate. He said he could provide the statement, but he could not control her behavior outside of official HOA actions. I told him that was unacceptable. He said it was the best he could do. I thanked him and left, but I knew this was not over. That night I got an email from Paul with a statement clearing me of the theft allegation. It was one paragraph and it said the evidence did not support the claim. I saved it. Then I got a text from Leo. He said Melissa was at the mailbox cluster trying to get the mailroom worker to hand over delivery logs. The worker refused. Melissa was yelling. Leo sent me a photo. I looked at it. Melissa had her phone out and she was taking photos of the worker. The worker looked scared. I forwarded the photo to Paul with a message saying Melissa was harassing staff and residents, and I wanted a no-contact directive. Paul replied an hour later and said he would talk to her. I asked for a timeline. He did not respond. The next morning, I found a notice taped to my door. It was printed on HOA letterhead, and it said I was required to attend a compliance hearing next week to address unresolved questions about the theft. I called Paul immediately. He said he did not authorize the notice. I asked him who did. He said Melissa must have printed it herself. I told him that was harassment. He said he would follow up. I asked him when. He said by end of week. I told him I wanted the hearing canceled in writing. He said he would send confirmation. I hung up and called an attorney. The attorney was a woman named Karen, which was ironic. She practiced HOA law. I explained the situation. She said Melissa was likely violating multiple provisions of the Idaho Homeowners Association Act, and I could file a complaint with the state. I asked her how long that would take. She said months. I asked if there was a faster option. She said I could demand a formal board meeting and force the board to address Melissa's conduct. I told her the board was slow. She said I could also file a police report if Melissa was harassing me or interfering with my property. I asked if a fake hearing notice counted. She said it might, depending on how it was presented. She told me to document everything and call her if it escalated further. I thanked her and hung up. I spent the rest of the day gathering more evidence. I went to the storage closet area where the padlock keys were supposedly stolen. The closet was unlocked. I took photos. Inside were boxes of old HOA records, landscaping supplies, and a plastic bin with a handwritten label that said committee materials. I opened the bin. Inside were file folders, a handheld radio, a cheap badge on a clip, and a stack of blank violation notices. I took photos of everything. Then I noticed something weird. One of the folders had a printed timeline inside. The timeline was identical to the one Melissa submitted to Paul, but it had an earlier date at the bottom. The earlier version said the theft happened at 10 p.m., not 11 p.m. I took a photo of both pages side by side. Then I heard footsteps. I closed the bin and walked out. It was Melissa. She saw me coming out of the storage area, and she screamed. She said I was trespassing and she was calling the police. I told her the door was unlocked and I was a resident. She said I had no authorization to be there. I told her I was documenting HOA property because she was filing false complaints. She pulled out her phone and started taking photos with the lens inches from my face. I stepped back and told her to stop. She did not stop. She kept snapping photos and yelling that I was a thief and a liar. I kept my hands at my sides and my voice calm. A neighbor walking by stopped and asked if everything was okay. Melissa turned and told the neighbor to mind their own business. The neighbor looked at me. I said I was fine. The neighbor walked away, but they were clearly uncomfortable. Melissa turned back to me and said if I did not leave, she would have me arrested. I told her I was leaving, and I walked back to my unit. That afternoon, I sent Paul another email with the photos of the storage closet, the 2 timelines, and Melissa's harassment. I told him I was filing a police report if he did not take immediate action. He called me 10 minutes later. He said he reviewed the photos and he was concerned. I asked him what he was going to do. He said he was scheduling a meeting with Melissa and the board president to address her conduct. I asked when. He said tomorrow. I asked if I could attend. He said no, because it was an internal personnel matter. I told him I wanted a written update after the meeting. He agreed. The next day I waited. No update from Paul. I called him at 4 p.m. He said the meeting happened, but he could not share details. I asked if Melissa was removed from enforcement duties. He said not yet. I asked when. He said it was pending further review. I told him that was unacceptable and I was escalating to the state. He said that was my right, but he recommended patience. I hung up. That night, Melissa taped another notice to my door. This one said I was banned from using the clubhouse amenities pending resolution of the compliance matter. I took a photo and sent it to Paul and the attorney. The attorney replied first. She said that was likely illegal and I should file a complaint with the Idaho Attorney General. I started filling out the online form. While I was typing, Leo texted me. He said Melissa was at the management office trying to get them to print a formal suspension notice while people watched. Travis was refusing. Melissa was dragging a rolling file cart into the lobby like it was a courtroom exhibit. Leo said it was insane. He sent me a video. I watched it. Melissa had the cart stacked with folders, and she was waving a clipboard at Travis and yelling that she had documentation. Travis kept saying he could not print anything without authorization from Paul. Melissa said she was the authorization. Travis said no. Melissa slammed her hand on the counter. A woman in the waiting area got up and left. Raj, the pool attendant, walked over and told Melissa she needed to calm down. She turned and yelled at him to stay out of it. Raj said he was calling Paul. Melissa said go ahead. Raj made the call. Paul showed up 20 minutes later. Leo was still filming. Paul told Melissa to leave the office. She refused. He told her again. She said she was conducting official business. Paul said she was not authorized to conduct business without board approval. She said her role gave her discretion. Paul raised his voice and said her discretion was suspended effective immediately and she needed to leave. Melissa went silent. Then she grabbed the handle of the file cart and tried to wheel it out. Paul stepped in front of the cart and said the files were HOA property and she could not remove them. She let go of the cart and walked out without another word. Paul turned to Travis and told him to secure the cart in the back office. Travis nodded. Paul looked at Raj and said thank you. Raj said no problem. Then Paul left. Leo sent me the whole video. I watched it 3 times. Melissa looked desperate. Paul looked exhausted. I forwarded the video to the attorney with a note asking if this was enough for a restraining order. She replied and said maybe, but I would need to show a credible threat. I told her Melissa was already threatening towing, access bans, and fake hearings. She said that might be enough. She told me to file a petition and include all the evidence. I said I would. The next morning I went to the county courthouse and filed a petition for a civil protection order. I attached the doorbell clip, the 2 timelines, the harassment photos, Leo's videos, the fake hearing notice, and the clubhouse ban notice. The clerk reviewed it and said a judge would decide within 10 days whether to issue a temporary order. I asked what happened in the meantime. She said I should avoid contact with Melissa and document any further incidents. I thanked her and left. That afternoon, Melissa tried to grab my phone during a confrontation in the parking lot. I was walking to my car, and she came out of nowhere yelling that I was not allowed to record her. I had my phone in my hand, but I was not recording. She reached for it. I stepped back and told her not to touch me. She lunged again. I turned and walked fast toward my car. She followed me yelling. A neighbor saw it and shouted at her to stop. Melissa ignored them. I got in my car and locked the doors. She stood outside banging on the window and screaming that I was going to pay for ruining her. I started the engine and reversed out slowly. She stepped back, but she kept yelling. I drove to the front of the complex and called the police. A deputy arrived 15 minutes later. I explained what happened. He took notes. He asked if I had video. I said no, but the neighbor saw it. He asked for the neighbor's name. I pointed to the unit. He walked over and knocked. The neighbor, an older woman named Diane, answered and confirmed she saw Melissa try to grab my phone. The deputy thanked her and came back to me. He said he would file a report and I would get an incident number. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I said I wanted a record in case it happened again. He said that was fine. He gave me the incident number and said I could reference it in my protection order petition. I thanked him. He left. I sat in my car shaking. This was worse than I thought. That night I got a call from Paul. He said management was taking over enforcement decisions and removing Melissa's discretion. I asked what that meant. He said Melissa would no longer have access to the storage areas, the filing system, or the authority to issue violations. I asked if she was off the landscape committee. He said not yet, but her role was being reviewed by the board. I asked when the board would decide. He said next month. I told him next month was too far away. He said it was the fastest they could move. I asked if the clubhouse ban was lifted. He said yes. I asked if the fake hearing was canceled. He said yes. I asked for written confirmation. He said he would send it. I hung up. The written confirmation arrived the next morning. It was a short email saying the compliance hearing scheduled for next week was canceled, and I was cleared to use all HOA amenities. I forwarded it to the attorney. She said it was progress, but not enough. She said I should push for a full ban on Melissa accessing any HOA enforcement tools and a formal apology. I told her I did not care about an apology. I wanted her consequences to stick. She said the best way to ensure that was to get the board to adopt a policy clarification that destroyed her favorite tactic, unilateral enforcement without board approval. I asked how. She said I could submit a written proposal to the board and present it at the next meeting. I said I would do it. I spent the weekend drafting the proposal. It was 2 pages. It said all enforcement actions required a board vote, all evidence had to be logged and made available to the accused, and all appeals had to follow a transparent process with timelines. I cited the Idaho Homeowners Association Act and included examples of how Melissa violated it. I emailed the proposal to Paul and the board president with a request to add it to the agenda for the next board meeting. Paul replied and said he would forward it. The board president did not reply. The next week, I got a notice that the board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. I marked my calendar. On Thursday, I showed up early. The meeting room was small and already half full. I took a seat in the back. Melissa walked in 5 minutes later. She saw me and her face went hard. She sat in the front row. The board president, a tired-looking man named Greg, called the meeting to order. He went through the usual business, budget updates, landscaping bids, pool maintenance. Then he said there was a policy proposal on the agenda submitted by a resident. He asked me to stand. I stood. Greg said I had 3 minutes to present. I walked to the front and laid out my case. I explained what Melissa did. I showed the timeline contradiction. I mentioned the doorbell clip. I pointed out that management already suspended her discretion, and this policy would make that permanent. Greg listened. The other board members looked uncomfortable. Melissa sat silent with her arms crossed. When I finished, Greg thanked me and asked if there were any questions. One board member, a woman named Linda, asked if I had proof of the timeline contradiction. I pulled out the 2 printed pages and held them up. The room went quiet. Linda leaned forward to look. Melissa stood up and said those documents were taken from a restricted area without authorization. I said the storage closet was unlocked and I photographed HOA property that was being used to file false complaints. Greg told Melissa to sit down. She did not sit. She said I was lying and I was trying to destroy her reputation. Greg raised his voice and told her to sit or leave. She sat. Greg looked at the documents. He asked if he could see them. I handed them over. He passed them to Linda. She looked at both pages and shook her head. She said the dates were different and the times were different and someone needed to explain why. Greg looked at Melissa. She said nothing. Greg said the board would take the proposal under advisement and vote at the next meeting. I asked when that was. He said next month. I told him I wanted a vote tonight. He said that was not possible. I asked why. He said the board needed time to review. I said they had the proposal for a week. He said they needed more time. I sat down. After the meeting, I walked out and Leo caught up with me. He said that was brutal. I said it was progress. He asked if I thought they would vote yes. I said I did not know, but I had one more card to play. I told him about the protection order petition. He said that might push them. I said I hope so. We walked to the parking lot. Melissa was standing by my car. She saw me and smiled. She said I could present all the evidence I wanted, but the board would never side with me because I was a troublemaker. I told her the board already suspended her authority. She laughed and said that was temporary. I told her it was not. She said we would see. Then she walked away. The next day, I got a call from the courthouse. The judge issued a temporary protection order. It said Melissa had to stay 50 feet away from me and could not contact me directly or indirectly. The order was good for 30 days pending a full hearing. I called Paul and told him. He said he would notify Melissa. I asked if the board knew. He said he would inform them. I thanked him and hung up. 2 days later, I got an email from Greg. It said the board voted unanimously to adopt the policy clarification that destroyed Melissa's favorite tactic: unilateral enforcement without board approval. All future enforcement actions required a board vote. Greg also said Melissa was removed from all enforcement roles and banned from access to HOA storage areas pending a review of her conduct. I read the email twice. Then I called the attorney and told her. She said it was a solid outcome. She asked if I was satisfied. I said almost. I asked if I could get reimbursed for the tow threat and the attorney fees. She said I could request it from the board. I said I would. I drafted a reimbursement request and sent it to Greg. He replied 2 days later and said the board approved a settlement covering the tow fees I never paid, a refund of last month's dues as compensation, and an agreement that the HOA would pay my attorney fees up to a reasonable cap. He attached a release form. I read it. It said I agreed not to sue the HOA in exchange for the settlement. I signed it and sent it back. A week later, I got a check. The final piece fell into place when Leo told me Melissa tried to confiscate my evidence binder during a run-in at the mailbox cluster. He said she grabbed for it and he snapped a photo of her reaching. The photo went viral in the neighborhood group chat. People started posting their own stories about Melissa. One guy said she tried to fine him for parking in his own driveway. A woman said Melissa stole a package off her porch and claimed it was a code violation. Another neighbor said Melissa threatened to report their dog as a nuisance because it barked at her. The stories kept coming. Paul called me that night and said the board was opening a formal investigation into Melissa's conduct. I told him it was about time. He said they were serious. I said I would believe it when I saw consequences. He said I would. 3 weeks later, I got another email from Greg. It said the board completed the investigation and Melissa was removed from the landscape committee permanently. She was also banned from serving on any HOA committee for 5 years. Greg said management took over all enforcement decisions, and Melissa had no authority over residents or property. He said the board apologized for the way the situation was handled, and they implemented new oversight procedures. I replied and thanked him. Then I closed my laptop and went outside. The neighborhood felt different after that. People said hello again. The clubhouse was quieter. Melissa still lived 2 buildings over, but I never saw her. Paul told me she stopped coming to board meetings. Leo said she put her unit up for sale. I did not ask. I had my car, my deliveries, my access, and my peace. The HOA learned that enforcement without accountability was a liability. Melissa learned that stealing and framing people would come back to bite her. And I learned that building a file and staying calm was the best revenge. I hope your next meeting is uneventful.